two players in the feature match area already. We have Brandon Chen over on the right-hand side playing the Orzhov version of the Greasefang deck, which they do have their decks out. It's not just their stuff gathered up. The camera, for some reason, was not working. Going up against Kevin Duda, who is going to be on the left-hand side here, playing a Boros version of the 8-whack deck. It's a little bit more convoke-y than just straight-up 8-whack. We have Voldaren Epicures that we see on the battlefield right here, as well as Warden in the Inner Sky, but is mainly going to be doing Imodane's Recruiter things, as well as Goblin Bushwhacker. Meanwhile, on the opposite side for Brandon, he's going to be continuing to play the Greasefang style of deck where the discard theme matters. However, this one specifically has pivoted a little bit more into utilizing cards like the Monument to Endurance, which is going to be something that will be able to turn those discards from things like Seasoned Hollowblade on the battlefield into triggers that will draw cards, create treasure tokens, and, of course, discard a Parhelion for a Greasefang to reanimate. Both players have already gotten some things on the board here, as you see Kevin Duda already going to town with some Epicures and some blood tokens, doing a little bit of discard in and of himself, getting a little bit of ping damage coming on down. Also being able to tap these blood tokens, as well as it looks like these Phyrexian goblins that came out of a gleeful demolition over on Duda's side, in order to get a little bit of scry action going on, get a little bit of +1/+1 counter action going down on this Warden of the Inner Sky.
Another one.
And it looks like there is an additional Warden coming down, but instead we're going to keep growing the first one here. For those that don't know, Warden of the Inner Sky, 1/2, that is giving the ability for all of these creatures to tap down to add a +1/+1 counter to itself, as well as scry 1. Duda has to do this as a sorcery, so he has to do it on his turn, potentially before attack, so that he can wind up getting it up to 3 counters, so it has flying and vigilance, which is exactly what happened here. And we got Brandon all the way down to 13 that way. But Brandon has the opposite side, the combo here that the Greasefang deck wants to see. We wind up discarding a Parhelion, we play our Greasefang, and now we are getting 13 damage worth of Angels and flying vehicles on the battlefield. And of course, thanks to Seasoned Hollowblade, Brandon's just going to be able to do this again and again because of that free discard outlet. So this, even though Duda was off to the races fairly early, 13 damage in the air is a lot, and Duda may be up against the ropes where Brandon may be the one that's winding up taking game number 1. And as we can see here, Seasoned Hollowblade is that repeatable discard outlet, so even though the Parhelion bounced back to hand at end of turn thanks to Greasefang Claws, you could just discard at end of turn and do it all over again. Duda now has to deal with these 4/4 flying Vigilance Angels, which are going to be a very difficult problem for him to overcome. If there was only tapped creatures on the opposing side of the battlefield, you could potentially kill this turn with an Imodane's Recruiter or that Goblin Bushwhacker turn. However, Duda's got to get through a bunch of blockers first, and that's going to be the difficult thing here. But this deck is very aggressive and does have ways to go wide, so we'll have to see if Duda has what it takes to beat these Angels. We're activating our Warden first, so this is going to put it up to a 5/6. Duda wants to keep that one on top. But is there a card draw outlet? I don't see any bloods, and it looks like we're just swinging in aggressively.
Damage. I'll make this indestructible.
We're going to save the Seasoned Hollowblade with our discard. We're going to get a double block on the Angels, which means that one of them is going to die. So did Duda find some sort of main deck graveyard hate from his earlier draw? Brandon does take 2 damage still from the Epicures. We have an Ornithopter, so we have a blocker.
Mega Synth, Crypt Caller Chariot, Combat.
Oh, and we have the Crypt Caller Chariot, so we got a plethora and a wealth of riches here for Brandon, and that is just going to overwhelm what Duda has on the board as far as blockers go, and the whack deck is the one that is going to got first in game number 1, as Brandon is going to take that one with the Orzhov Greasefang deck.
You have Ride's End in your...
Brandon asking, Duda, do you have Ride's End potentially to bring in here? Ride's End would be able to just exile the Greasefang, as it just exiles tapped creatures. Unfortunately, it would not be able to get rid of the Parhelion, although I should probably double check at first. Yeah, it's just a tapped creature, or permanent. It costs 3 less. Ride's End can actually exile a vehicle. However, if the vehicle is not tapped, it's going to cost the full 5. It's not going to be able to get that discount that all those up the beanstalk players were liking so much in Standard for a while. But as we do wind up going into game number 2, if Duda has any sort of graveyard hate, that's probably what we're going to be bringing in here. Although Duda's deck does want to wind up being a little bit more on the aggressive side, so I don't know if we're going to have things like Rest in Peace coming out of his sideboard and having him want to take an entire turn off for something like that. But what I could potentially see is something like a Veteran Survivor or a Lion Sash coming in from Duda's sideboard, and those would be more proactive graveyard hate cards that would still kind of further your plan. Now, combining Warden of the Inner Sky with Veteran Survivor, you're going to get that survival trigger. So you're going to be able to, at the beginning of your second main phase, exile a card from your opponent's graveyard. Now, the downside is, unlike the previous versions of the Greasefang combo deck, Brandon's deck is going to allow him to discard things at instant speed thanks to those discard outlets like the Seasoned Hollowblade, Guardian of New Benalia, and you know, all the different kinds of cards that we wind up having there. I think there's like a Fleeting Spirit or something is another 3/1 that can flicker when you discard a card. But all of those are instant speed discard outlets, so the graveyard hate isn't going to be as powerful if it's targeted, which means that those Rest in Peace or general effects are going to be a little bit easier to deal with. Selfless Spirit? Sorry, not Selfless Spirit. What is the other one? There's another spirit that you can sacrifice it and it will exile target player's graveyard. I think it's a 2 mana... I can't remember the name. Actually remember the name of it right now. However, I am going to use the power of Scryfall to find that one in order to figure out what that one was called. That would be something that's a little bit more aggressive that may line up a little bit better with Duda's plan to be something that would, you know, wind up being more in line with him dealing some damage and putting things on the battlefield. He can actually tap that one for Convoke or tap it in order to activate different things. Remorseful Cleric was the name of what I was thinking of. It's a 2/1 flyer just for 1 and a white, and you can sacrifice it to exile all cards from target player's graveyard. I'll bring that one up on the screen for us as our players are shuffling up and taking their mulligans for game number 2, where Duda's going to be on the play. But this is one of those proactive pieces of graveyard hate that Duda could put on the battlefield and then threaten to exile at instant speed, the same way that Brandon is going to be threatening to discard things at instant speed. Does look like, unfortunately, our Brandon's camera has suffered a little bit of a one-sided earthquake and is now a little bit tilted. Rest assured, he won game number 1. He is probably not as tilted as his camera looks. Looks like Duda is keeping his 7, however. We saw Knight Errant of Eos in his hand, 3 lands, in addition to a couple of extra cards I can't quite tell right now, but Brandon going down to 6. We are playing a Greasefang deck, which is by nature a combo-centric deck. The pieces are very synergistic with one another, so it's probably going to be very easy to get some mulligans, especially on the draw. But Duda's going to be starting off with just a tap Sacred Foundry and passing of the turn. I see a Thrabing Inspector in hand, so that's going to wind up hitting the battlefield, making a clue token, but no follow-up Gleeful Demolition from Duda, so he's not overcommitting to the board here. Portable Holes come in from Brandon's sideboard choice here. Didn't really get a chance to talk too much about the Orzhov Greasefang deck is going to be bringing in. Anything to get rid of low mana cost creatures, any sort of Fatal Push effects, these Portable Holes specifically, going to be prime real estate for Brandon in this matchup. Looks like Witchstalker's Frenzy was brought in here from Duda. I'll pull that one up just for a second. The Standard All-Star, which kind of combined with Screaming Nemesis in Standard, is going to be something along the lines that you can get rid of either the vehicles or Greasefang specifically. And it doesn't matter which creatures are attacking to reduce the cost. So if you animate the Parhelion with Greasefang, you can reduce the cost on your opponent's turn based on how many creatures are attacking. So that means the Angels, the Parhelion, and then if there's another creature down there, this could potentially just cost 1 mana. All right, so we did wind up having that Fleeting Spirit Gonna double check that that is actually the name of it. There it is, Fleeting Spirit from Brandon's side. This is another one of those discard outlets, and you can exile cards from your graveyard to give it first strike if you want, but mostly it's that flicker discard effect that you're gonna wind up playing it for in this list specifically. The Warden of the Inner Sky did come down on Duda's side, however, as he did wind up poking down Brandon a little bit here. Sheltered by Ghost is going to be coming out here, and Duda has an opportunity to respond to this ward and removal spell, but it looks like it is just going to go after the Warden in the Inner Sky, and Sheltered by Ghost is going to be a little problematic here because unless you have to flicker that spirit, it's going to be really difficult to remove that warded up target at this point. Brandon did actually wind up swinging as well, so we have Duda now going down to 16 thanks to the extra +1/+0, and the lifelink brings Brandon back up to 22 with that swing.
Yep.
Duda can just swing back with his Thraben Inspector, and it looks like he has a handful of additional permission. I think there's a Gleeful Demolition in hand. We knew about the Witchstalker Frenzy that he had a little bit earlier. Let's see. Looks like Monument is on the stack. Rending Volley is going to come into play. So we are going to flicker the Fleeting Spirit. So that does mean the Shelter by Ghost goes away. And we are getting our Warden of the Inner Sky back. So this Monument to Endurance is resolved now. So this is going to be the main engine for Brandon's deck. Yes, it is a Greasefang combo deck, but this Monument to Endurance adds longevity and an extra angle of attack. You can do the first discard to draw a card. You can then wind up doing additional discards with your free discard outlet to make treasures, drain your opponents, or just deal 3 damage to your opponents. Basically a lightning bolt on a stick. But this Monument to Endurance is really what's breathed life into these non-Abzan versions of Greasefang. There are some Abzan versions that still run it, but the Orzhov one specifically gets to run these 3 free discard outlets and the Greasefang combo without having to tax its mana across 3 different colors. Duda played, it's a card from Tarkir Dragonstorm. It makes 2 goblins, but it can also pump up your entire team. You need to just figure out what that card was. However, we do wind up having just Knight Errant of Eos hitting the battlefield. So Frontline Rush was the name of the card here. Duda deciding on end step was going to just create 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, and then being able to give +X/+X till end of turn where X is the number of creatures you control if there's like a flying warden or something. Duda's Knight Errant of Eos.
Anytime I see like 6 cards,
Did it
I see
whiff?
a 1-drop and nothing else, I'm like, really?
So he convoked it out, but unfortunately looks like was a big old whiff here. So Knight Errant of Eos being a sleeper agent for Brandon in this one. Yes, that is Brandon Chen over there on stream playing his Orzhov Greasefang Monument to Endurance deck. Arabella hits the battlefield here for Duda. This is going to be something that synergizes very well with all of the power 2 or less creatures that Duda has. It's going to, whenever it attacks, it'll deal X damage to each opponent, and you'll gain X life, or X is the number of creatures you control with power 2 or less. So although this is a 1/3 and could potentially be blocked, if Brandon wants to keep that Fleeting Spirit alive as a discard outlet, it's not going to actually kill the Arabella, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 creatures on the side of Duda's battlefield. However, this Greasefang does wind up coming on down. So Greasefang's going to crew this Parhelion, and 2 Angels will wind up hitting the battlefield. But we know that Duda has a Witchstalker's Frenzy, and that's going to be reduced by 3 right now.
They're attacking. Right, yeah, I think they're
So Duda's actually going to take 13 damage, though.
Go to your upkeep. Yep.
On upkeep, though, Duda is going to get drained by this Monument to Endurance. So,
but those didn't attack, so
No.
get the discount.
Oh.
They weren't declared as attackers.
I say they are not declared as attackers, though, so I guess Duda was not able to actually cast that Witchstalker's Frenzy for enough of a discount. And so because of that, on upkeep, that Parhelion bounces back to hand. The Monument to Endurance is going to discard and deal the remaining 3 damage that Brandon needed to wind up winning the game. So that's it right there. Brandon Chen, just a quick 2-0 with the Orzhov Greasefang deck.